Welcome back to the range, and in fact the gun shop. It's a bit different today. What we're going to do is, firstly I'm going to talk to you about something that's quite extraordinary, a story that I've just heard and verified with the guy it happened to. And it's so important, I think, for shooters to know about this, that this is why I'm going to do this video. And what it is a 20 gauge being fired in a 12 gauge on a shoot, and the gun exploded and it destroyed the guy's hand. And this happened in Zimbabwe about 2 or 3 months ago. And I've just spoken to the gentleman who it happened with, who's a very experienced shooter. And I've always wondered, over the years we hear about 20 gauges in 12 gauge and so on, and you think, firstly, there's two presumptions. One, it's usually on a clay shoot, and it's an inexperienced shooter. And actually, or it's a mixed bag of ammunition, it's on somebody's hip, or they've got a mixed bag of ammunition in their pocket, and they're just putting out cartridges and they mix up the ammo. And what this incident in Zimbabwe shows is a very experienced shooter who I spoke to yesterday. This happened to him, and the way it happened is quite extraordinary, and I think it's really, as shooters, all of us should know these stories. And it makes us better, safer shooters, and that's really important. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the story as it happened to him. It's very quick, and I'm going to show you the gun it happened to and exactly what happened. And we're going to show you the pictures of his hand after it's been healed. We're not going to show you the pictures of the hand when it was actually damaged, because it's quite horrible, it's quite gnarly. And we're going to show you some pictures of the gun just now. Now, it happened in Zimbabwe, and this gentleman was out shooting with friends, and they were shooting pigeons, and there was a lot of pigeons, and the shooting was very frenetic and intense. He was shooting with a silver pigeon, Beretta silver pigeon 12 gauge. And there were no 20 gauge cartridges amongst the group. There were none. His ammunition in his bag was solely 12 gauge, and there were no other 12 gauge shooters, 20 gauge shooters within his group. And what happened is somebody had dropped in a vehicle on a different shoot. They dropped a 20 gauge cartridge, and it was on the floor of the vehicle. And none of these shooters saw it, but one of the beaters saw it. And one of the beaters picked up this 20 gauge cartridge and put it into his shooting bag. And he was unaware of that. So lots of pigeons, and of course we all know when we're shooting fast, there's pigeons, it's very exciting. We're loading, and we're loading as fast as we can, boom, boom, load, boom, boom. And who at that point is checking their cartridges? You're not checking your cartridges, are you? So as he was shooting, he was actually on the back of a vehicle when he was taking this shot. And what happened is he opened the gun, dropped the cartridges into the gun, and 2 cartridges, and one obviously stuck, and the 20 gauge that he'd picked up out of his bag went down the barrel. Okay, to about here. He then closed the gun, took a shot at a pigeon, and it went click. And he thought, oh, I must have dropped the cartridge on the floor. So what he did, he opened the gun. He put another 12 gauge cartridge in. In the meantime, this 20 gauge was sitting right here. He closed the gun. It was in the lower barrel. He took the shot. Now, what happened? The 12 gauge went off, obviously. It hit the 20 gauge. And what happened is the gun exploded here. And that's exactly where his hand is, right here. And all of this, part of the gun, the fore end and so on, all exploded. And you can see those in the photographs we're showing you. The gun exploded, and it really seriously damaged his hand. It dislocated his thumb. No bones were broken, but it had a very significant amount of flesh damage. Now, 2 months later, you can see the picture of his hand. It's remarkable how much it's recovered. It really is. And he says that he's got most of his movement back, and there's a little bit of tendon damage that may not recover, but overall, he's very happy with the progress his hand's made. I think that's amazing. I mean, when we saw the damage initially of the hand, it was really quite bad. So he's very lucky. The hospital was only 6 minutes away. So he went to the hospital in Zimbabwe. Luckily for him, there was a very experienced surgeon on call who came in straight away and helped to sew his hand back together. What it shows you is very bizarre circumstances that actually led to this incident. And it was an experienced shooter, an experienced group of shooters, no 20 gauge amongst the shooters, but a 20 gauge cartridge in the vehicle that a third party, non-experienced shooter dropped into his bag, unknown to him. Absolutely incredible story. I really, really appreciate him talking to us about this, and that input helps other shooters in the future, helps other shooters avoid this mistake. We've been hearing about this over the years. There's a number of different ways it's happened, but this was, I thought, was a really, really interesting incident. Anyway, what we're going to show you now is our attempt to fire we're going to fire a 12 gauge into the back of a 20 gauge, which is stuck in a 12 gauge, and we're going to see what happens to the gun. But we're not going to use one of these lovely silver pigeons from Beretta. We're going to use an old single barrel shotgun, and we're going to see how that works out. I hope you enjoy it. Now, this little dude, who's had a bit of his face eaten by rats over the years. So what we're going to do is, George here, our crash test dummy, is going to fire a very old 12 gauge shotgun with this in the barrel. And we're going to fire this into this, and we're going to see what happens. We're not going to be in the shooting range when this happens. We're going to activate this with a bit of fishing line. If it looks jury-rigged and a bit Fred Karno, that's because it is. So this isn't Mythbusters, this is just Busters. And we're going to bust this, we're going to see what happens, if anything, to his hand and generally his demeanour. As I say, this is from rats ate him while he was in the shed, and they've also eaten his other ear. Rats like ears, I don't know, what do you know? Okay, so let's crack on, we'll set this up and then we'll see how it goes. Right, so this is our 20 gauge. Now this is the 12 gauge gun, and if we push that in there, we can see that doesn't obviously go in. And so what we're expecting to happen is it'll come down here and it'll sit about here somewhere. That's what we're expecting. Now with our 12 gauge, that obviously doesn't even go in at all. Okay, so we're going to push this down here to about here, put this here, exit the range, fire the gun, and we will video, and hopefully it doesn't destroy our cameras. It might do, who knows. So we've jury-rigged George over here. He's got his glasses on, he's got his ear things. We've used this because we need a bit more leverage on the trigger to fire the gun. Now there's our 20 gauge cartridge, and I'm guessing it'll go somewhere here. We're going to put it in now. We're going to shove it down with this, and we'll see how far it goes. Right, here we go. Open that. There's our 20 gauge cartridge. Now, what we can do is we can measure the distance that's gone down with this stick. Oh wow, it's hardly gone down anywhere. That's really surprising. I thought it would actually go much further, but it hasn't. It's only gone to there. And that is, wow, that's barely more than the 12 gauge cartridge. It's only gone that far. So if our 12 gauge cartridge is sitting there, you can see that there's only that much distance between the 12 gauge cartridge and the 20 gauge cartridge, which really surprises me. I thought it would actually sit down here, because when we've seen these things explode from and people's hands be injured, it's always the front hand that takes the damage. Now also this area here is the strongest part of the gun. This is, this is your breech. This is very, very thick here. So I'm really interested to see actually what this does. We're using a 24 gram 20 gauge cartridge with 7.5 in, and this is a treble A 12 gauge cartridge, which is going to go in a minute once we're ready to do it. But we have to be very careful. We don't want it to go off by accident. Now this is a hammer action gun. We can see the hammer is in the right position. So if we do that and we pop that in there, that's not going to go in. I don't think it's going to go in far enough, because no, it is. It should go in all the way. Oh yeah, and there we go. So that's now a 20 gauge in here and a 12 gauge in there. This is going to replicate what has happened many times over the years, and what it's demonstrating is don't mix up your ammo. Don't keep 20 gauge and 12 gauge in the same container, the same belt. Keep them separate. Really important, keep them separate. Right, I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to set up our cameras, and then we're going to exit this range, and then we're going to fire this gun. Let's go. Okay, we expected much more action than that, that's for sure. Let's do this. So that's our 20 gauge went off. Oh, well, something happened which is, to me, amazing. So maybe it's because this is a very, very old gun. This gun is probably 50, 60 years old. This area here of steel is immensely strong. We fired a 12 gauge cartridge here onto a 20 gauge here, expecting the barrel, boom, to blow up. And you know what? It didn't happen. What it did is it expelled the shotgun, the 20 gauge, out of the end of the barrel. And it doesn't appear to have caused any damage at all. What we're going to do is we're going to quickly undress all this crap off here and have a look at the gun. Well, George's hand survived, and we completely did not get the results we expected from this. And I think the reason is that this old shotgun, I don't even know what make this is, I haven't even looked. It does say on the side, hang on, let me get my glasses. Right, this old Model 370 12 gauge was built in an era where they built things strong. And you can see this area here, right up to here, is extremely thick steel. And it's quite clear that this is vastly stronger than today's modern shotguns. We just fired a 12 gauge cartridge into a 20 gauge cartridge, and the whole thing, the 20 gauge exited the barrel. Now, all we've recovered is that. And what we're figuring is that the remnants of this 20 gauge cartridge, you can see the cap, there's even lead sitting in there, hit the front wall of the shooting range and bounced back, because we found this underneath the table here where Georgie Porgy is sitting. There it is, that's what's left. So what we expected to happen is for this barrel, boom, to blow up, as it did in Zimbabwe the other day and destroyed a guy's hand. Very serious. And over the years, a number of over and unders that's happened, people have put the wrong ammo in. But amazingly, this old Winchester is so bloody strong, so bulletproof, that it fired a 20 gauge out of the barrel without any problem at all. There's no damage to this gun. It is quite extraordinary. What a piece of engineering. Well done, Winchester. A real tribute to you for your old style guns. So as you can see from our crash test dummy, we didn't manage to blow up the gun. And what's really interesting is with that old, very robust 12 gauge single barrel shotgun that we've just used, the steel here is far, far thicker than these Beretta over and unders. I mean, this here, the barrel, the taper is right here where the cartridge goes, and then the barrel slims down. Whereas you can see in that single barrel 12 gauge we just used, the actual taper is very long. It comes right through here, and it's very thick steel. And yeah, it's extremely robust. So very interesting experiment. Maybe one day we'll fire the same through one of these, and we'll see if we can get this to explode. But of course, over and under shotguns are quite expensive, and we'll have to, maybe we get to 10,000 subscribers, we'll fire one through over and under. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.